Hey guys, welcome to Hope It Helps. And my guest on the show today is Mr. Zaid Farouki. Zaid, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. So, Zaid, me and you have known each other for a while, and I remember when you were first starting out in like your fashion journey, and here you are 4 or 5 years later, and to see what you've done is amazing. And I haven't
Thank you.
had anyone on the podcast that's in fashion, so I thought it'd be amazing to have someone who actually understands this industry and understands everything that goes on behind it. But before we get on to all the nitty gritty details, why don't you give all of us just a little bit of background about Zaid, and we'll take it from there.
All right. I started off with the background, or I have a degree in business administration and marketing, actually. And to keep kind of, because I come from an Arab background
Of
and
course.
Middle Eastern parents,
Yeah.
the arts was not an option.
Yeah.
So I got a degree in business administration and marketing. To keep like the inspiration flowing, I minored in art. And then once I did that, I moved and got a second degree in fashion design.
Yeah.
And then I eventually moved to Dubai. So I moved from DC, where I got my first degree, to Milan, to Dubai. I am Jordanian Palestinian and third generation in Saudi with American
Right,
passport.
yeah.
So like if you want to know like the whole background, this is me.
That's you, yeah. And something when I was doing my research and I read on your website, like the About Us page is like exactly what you just said. I had to do a 4 year degree first, and then I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. I'm like, that's the most Arab parent thing in the world. But then you went from there. So you went to DC. You did your marketing and business administration, and then you did. I think you had a blog at the time too, right?
I did.
What was it about?
It was actually just fashion, keeping up with the fashion news. I felt like I was so distant out of the fashion world. You know, DC, it's not in New York, LA, or Milan, or
Sure.
Paris.
Yeah.
I wanted to keep up with the world, what's happening. So I just started this little blog. Eventually stopped it when I kind of went into fashion school. But
It's like you're in it now. Then
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I just wanted to keep up with the news and share with people what I see on the daily, what I really enjoy, what I love. And actually, I kind of, looking back at it, I'm always like, oh, should I start it again?
Why not?
But it's still there. You
Yeah.
can actually go see it and see my inspiration and what I thought about.
Yeah, it'd be cool to go back and look at like what you're talking about back then and like see like to where you are now.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you also went to Milan and you studied there, and that must have been a pretty amazing experience.
That was, oh my God. That
Like
was
you're at
like,
home, kind of, you know. It's just where you
yes.
always wanted to be.
But it was so scary as well. I have this tendency of loving to pack up and moving as
Okay.
well.
Okay.
I kind of don't have that fear. And so I moved to Milan not knowing a single soul. I didn't speak Italian, not know a single soul. And I just moved there. And I think it was such an experience. It's just finding yourself.
Yeah, for sure. You're in like your own, like you're in a foreign country. You don't know the language, and and the school sounds like I'm not familiar with like what a good fashion school is, but if you're in Milan, I'm pretty sure it was a good one.
It was a good one. It was a really intense one, and I must say, like, it was really worth it. But it was just definitely another learning experience. Like, you don't, at least like when I moved to the U.S., I'm from there. I knew the city. I spoke the language. Over there, it was just like, oh hey,
Nothing.
you're
Yeah.
just getting thrown
Thrown
there.
in. Yeah, yeah, for sure. How long were you in Milan for?
I was there for a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and that's how long the course was?
That's okay. So in Italy or in Europe in general, except for the UK, which is surprising. So if you want to know Arab, that's kind of, they have that gene in them. So even in the fashion industry or in the arts, you don't get a bachelor's degree, you get a diploma.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It was very interesting. Like I didn't know that until I got there. And so what they had is an option in that university. It's like actual the 3 year diploma crunched into 1.5.
Oh, wow.
So like whatever you're producing in 3 years, you're creating in one, which is a fully intense course. Yeah, major mental breakdowns,
Yeah,
etc.
I'm sure.
But it was worth it. And especially that I had my bachelor's degree, I wanted to go more into that than have like another 3 year.
Yeah. You wanted to just like get the skills or the diploma you needed to keep pursuing what you wanted to pursue. You had that to fall back on, like if worst case scenario. But then from there, you also moved to London, didn't you?
Correct.
And how was that?
London was another experience for me. I had never lived there either. So I moved to London just to kind of fill out the gaps that I felt that I lacked from my Italian course.
Okay.
Or I wanted to kind of learn more of the details.
Sure.
So I went there and learned how to embroider, for example. I went there to learn how to actually stitch in a very specific technique for high-end pieces or couture pieces. So it was just very focused.
Yeah.
It did the courses over there. Honestly, after living in a Mediterranean country and coming from a Mediterranean country, you can't compare living in Northern Europe. I'm like, taking me back to the Mediterranean. This is where I am at.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you went DC, Italy, London, and then
Dubai.
back to Dubai.
No, I never lived in Dubai before.
You never grew up here? Oh, okay.
No.
So what made you decide to come to, I guess, Dubai?
It was, do you want to know the full-on kind of, I took the decision actually in the shower.
Okay. Okay. That's when the best ideas come anyway.
I had learned that Design District was opening up. They had just announced it. So it was back then. Everything was still on paper. Got in contact with them. And I think that's kind of a reoccurring theme in my life, that kind of the Arab part. I was finishing up my course in Milan. And I wanted to figure out where I want to move next.
Yeah.
I had my heart on staying in Italy.
Okay.
But it just didn't make sense in a way, personally or even business-wise.
Yeah.
So it didn't make sense because I needed to figure out how to, well, as an American, you could reside there, but you have to be in and out. You can't reside more than a few months without a permanent residency.
Yeah, of course.
But to get a permanent residency and start your own business was another hassle. And then again, we kind of sat there with my mentors and we figured out that at the end of the day, if I were to launch something in Italy or I were to launch something in the US, I'm still labeled as the Arab. So
okay, that's interesting.
I knew kind of off the bat, like I needed to move back to the region and be part of that community that's rising up. And D3 was just announcing, well, for people that don't know D3, it's the Dubai Design District. It's a full district for designers and creatives. And so I moved here. I knew at the end of the day, this is home. This is where I have to be, kind of back in the region.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. One thing I never actually considered is what you just said about you'd be seen that way in those kind of countries. Oh, you're the Arab designer in Italy, or you're the Arab designer in the US. And I never thought of that, and how that could potentially be a roadblock for you. Like, even if you have like amazing stuff, like moving forward, people could see it maybe as differently and so on. Or do you think that is the reason, or what do you think?
It couldn't be it's not a roadblock. So for example, what happens a lot in the fashion industry is like grants and opportunities, etc.
Okay.
So, and people tend to support people from their home country because it's certain talent that needs a lot of cash.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
So people tend to kind of support them tend to support the same community. First of all, I mentioned I don't speak Italian.
Sure.
I could barely I could get around with my broken Italian, but I needed another course to actually get to where I needed to be. But then again, even in the US, being American, you're still Arab American, like you're hyphenated.
Yes, you are.
And today, our biggest market is the Arab American market. One of the largest. So the people who live there, and that's who we cater to. which is a great thing. But I felt like we needed to kind of come back into the region because also, if I may say, like if I'm in Europe, how many people, how many designers and creatives? It's an institution. It's something. It's a fashion industry over there.
Yeah.
In the U.S., it's a continent on its own.
Literally, yeah.
Over here, you had kind of better opportunities to rise.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I looked at it that way from more of a business perspective than, oh, where did I feel like living? If I felt like living,
you would have stayed in
I would have stayed in Italy.
No, I think that's a very smart move and a good point that that's what, because you came when design district, I guess, was just like you said, just starting. So there probably would have been more opportunities from you, and Dubai's small. So in like Milan, in like the US, you're like trying to jump into an ocean and try to make a name for yourself. But here you have a much, I guess, better chance of getting your name out there and getting the success that you want. But you said that you were always interested in fashion. When I was doing my research, you were always interested. So where did this passion come from? Was it like from when you were a kid, or walk us through like all that? Because you seemed pretty set on it that you knew this is what you wanted to do.
All right. So I've always been the creative type in general.
Sure.
I went to a nerd school, so I wasn't allowed to showcase any of my creativity like growing up. Literally just lectured in maths and maths and sciences, and that was it. That was like your future. Funny enough, that school sent me a few years later after graduating. They're like, please do tell us how the maths and sciences have affected your career. And I'm like, I didn't even answer. I'm like, you're kidding me. Like, I paint for a living and I draw for a living. Nothing.
Thanks for the math. Appreciate it. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been. So my mom's an interior designer. Actually, it's something of a generational thing. My great grandmother was a painter as well. We even have some of her illustrations and drawings, etc. So it's something that creative kind of.
Always been like around you.
It's
It's been in the family.
It's been in the family.
Yeah.
I think just coming from Arabs or coming from a Middle Eastern family, no one capitalized onto it except you could be like an architect, an interior designer.
Sure.
So
yeah.
my mom's family does have the architects, the interior designers, etc. But it wasn't like, oh, hey, there's a painter in the family or there's a designer. No, it wasn't that. It was just the architects, interior designers all over.
Yeah. So when you decided to make that decision and you got your 4-year degree and you're like, okay, Mom, Dad, now I want to go do this. Were they still did they still have some hesitation, or they're like, "Khalas, okay, we made the deal, so like now it's okay"?
No, big time hesitation.
Yeah,
big time. Big time hesitation. But the thing is that I tend to believe I'm a calm child.
Okay.
So like I finished my business degree. It's supposed to be a 4-year course. I finished it in 3.5.
Okay.
I'm that type of person. Like I'm not a crazy party goer or anything of that sort. So kind of if I have something in my mind, I'll just get it done.
Yeah.
And I think it was part of like, oh, it's a year. Like, what is it gonna be? Like, let him go figure it out.
It's funny. What do they think now?
I think they're proud and happy.
I think they should be proud.
Hopefully. Ask them. I think that's the better people to ask. But I think there was a very big question mark for a while.
Sure.
Coming from our background in general.
Yeah, of course. It's not the, I guess, typical field that someone would go into.
I think it's not the typical field either. And I think, especially coming from my personal family background, it wasn't either that, like, I think as well, like I always relate it back, we as Palestinians have so much baggage that we come with, especially with work and work ethics, and like you just put your head down and
get it done.
So that was just like, where's the stability in it? Like you need to figure out somewhere that you're going to be stable and thrive in it rather than
Yeah, something that you
paying
can.
for the rest of your life. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I I relate to that sentiment so much. You have no idea. So Zaid, all your pieces, correct me if I'm wrong, are handmade, or at least the like art pieces, right?
Correct.
You like, I think the way you described it is you want it to be someone to be a walking piece of art.
Correct.
So when you're design, because I've seen some of your pieces, I'm like, in my mind when I see that stuff. So just a little bit of background. So my ex-girlfriend was a fashion designer. So I've been to the fashion shows. I've done the satwa runs for the fabric and for all that, and it always blows my mind how like there's like it's a blank piece of paper, and then like this drawing comes up, and then like you see it in real life. Like in my mind, because it's so far from like my talent or anything I can do, I find it so interesting. So when you're thinking about, let's say, like a special piece or something, what's the creative process that comes behind it? Like how does where does it start? Then how do you pick like the fabric? Then how do you like decide this is how it should be made and so on? Walk us through that process, 'cause I think it's really interesting.
Okay. So a lot of the times it's just kind of an idea or a story that I have. So we don't do collections. We're not seasonal. We just do that one of a kind pieces. But they all kind of stem from different themes or stories that I call.
Okay.
And I think I'm just stuck or fascinated by one story that I just take that and create pieces. So, for example, our first story was like the woman that walks into a castle and
Okay.
nothing lights her path except for candles.
Okay.
And so all I can imagine is someone walking and like nothing lighting her path except for candles. She is the heir of that kind of residence. And so I just kind of, it just goes there.
Okay.
It's just part of the whole storytelling experience. Sometimes fabric speaks. So if I have something in mind and I'm fabric shopping or something that I see in the studio, just tells me how the piece should be done. I don't. It just speaks to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I speak to objects, I guess.
Yeah. So it's just that. So it sounds like you just get it's a combination of like an inspiration from something and like just a story that you love or that you resonate with, I guess. And when and you said something interesting, because you don't make collections, and because I saw because I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, the typical thing you have like the seasonal collections, or you have like 2 a year. So why did you decide not to follow that, I guess, the traditional route? Why do you feel that? Why do you like doing the one-off pieces more?
Okay, so we have the one-off pieces under the brand Zaid Farouki, and then we have the ready-to-wear or the more casual pieces under the brand Zaid by Zaid Farouki. So the ready-to-wear and the one-of-a-kind pieces. From the beginning, I believe that first of all, the fashion industry, you have at least 2 seasons, so spring, summer, fall, winter.
Yeah.
For every year, we produce 6 months before. We showcase the collection 6 months before the season.
Okay. That's interesting. How come? Why so early?
Because 6 months before the season, people place their orders during that fashion show, and then you have like that time space to produce and then send them out to the studio, to the shops, etc.
Okay.
And of course, you need to beat the season, so they have to be in the stores before the fall, winter. So it's just
like planning ahead, like timeline kind of stuff.
yeah, big time. Also, so that's a minimum of 2, but because of fast fashion and like large brands had to compete now with Zara and H&M and all those brands, they started introducing more collections into their year.
Okay.
So you do fall, winter, spring, summer. Now you do a cruise collection, and then you do a capsule collection or a small collection. So now there are 4, and that's for every single. So that's for women and that's for men, and so that's at least 8 collections a year.
Yeah.
Which is complete nonsense to me, because coming from a small business that's just launching and then not really not having external funding or anything of that sort.
Sure. Yeah.
That is just how are you able to compete with that?
Yeah.
And already the system is rigged, where it's just, and automatically before going into the fashion industry, there was talks about how the future of fashion, how it's going to change, and because the system of having eight collections a year is unsustainable. It's burnout for the creatives. It's everything of that sort. Sure. So I was just like, I threw the whole idea out of the door. I'm like, if I'm showcasing once a year for the one-of-a-kind pieces. Anyways, we're a small team. By the time the year turns around, we barely have like, we showcase about 6 looks. Yes, 6 looks. By the time we produce the pieces, and that's how it went. And with our ready-to-wear, when we launched our ready-to-wear line, it's actually a men's line that's unisex, so like women are able to buy into it, and so it's kind of genderless clothing and seasonless as well. So it was just a no-brainer.
Yeah, and but the ready to wear side to the business came out more recently than the original, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
because it came out in our 3rd year of business, because we got at that time there was Fashion Forward, which is the fashion week over here.
Okay.
And we collaborated with Mini Cooper on launching a menswear line. So previously we were just doing women's wear.
Yeah.
And then we did a menswear line, a capsule collection for ready-to-wear men's line. And we really found a gap in the market.
Okay.
And we capitalized on it.
Okay. And which do you enjoy designing more? Women's clothing or men's?
Interesting. I think I enjoy both as equals, because men's I can tend to be able to wear them and pull them off and try them on and do the whole thing. But I think women's clothing, you tend to be more creative and out there and forward.
Yeah.
Men still have their reservations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's exactly the point. Like with women's clothing, you can like almost like let loose, because there's gonna be, it's just easier. You know, there's a higher chance that a woman will wear something like really out there than a guy.
Oh, 100%.
You know, just give me a t-shirt and I'm happy.
Exactly.
And something you said that so this is something I've never understood, the fashion show, right? So I've been to some and I've watched some as well. Now, I look at those shows and I'm like, and they're the most like crazy things I've ever seen. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is a fashion show, so I'm supposed to be advertising clothes that you would eventually wear. But I see lots of things in fashion show. I'm like, no one in the world is gonna wear this. Do you understand what I mean? So what's the purpose of a fashion show? Maybe I just don't understand, or how, because you said after the show, then that's how you plan for later on in the year, and that's when like you advertise your stuff there. So just walk me through what the purpose of it is.
So do you want historically or what's happening right now?
Let's do both.
Okay, so historically speaking, it was kind of, you had your atelier or etc., and you would invite your clients, editors, etc., very small, intimate, and you'll have the model walking down, showcasing the pieces, and kind of place their orders, or boutiques, etc., and place their orders. So we're talking back in the day when Christian Dior was alive and Chanel, etc. That was how. And that's how they sold their pieces. You invite your clientele, the media, some publications, boutiques, etc., and place the orders that way. And I think as we evolved, as the industry grew and there's more money to it and there's kind of more cash and visuals and marketing, etc., the bigger fashion shows became. And the fashion shows are more or less just a show of strength and marketing.
When you say marketing, I understand. What do you mean by strength?
Creative strength. So you're showcasing. Why you're saying is like, why do you find like pieces that may not be worn normally on a normal day? Because I'm showcasing my full-on. It's like you're flexing. Okay. You're flexing your creativity.
Okay.
That's why, like, if you go into the largest boutiques they'll tell you, oh, here's the t-shirts, the pants, or etc. And then this is a runway piece, and you'll find out the most over-the-top piece.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. That's how it is. So what happens is that I showcase my I flex with what creatively I have or the direction I'm going with. Those pieces go to editorials, go to celebrities, etc. for the people, or they're custom made for a certain client, client base, or placed orders. And then you kind of take certain elements, deconstruct them, and make them more wearable street style day-to-day outfits.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. That those are just, I think you said it perfectly, like flexing. Like this is what we can do. This is how we're thinking, and the fashion that comes after the show is derived from certain elements in all that.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you.
And it's no longer now like the buyers. It's now no longer the buyers, editors, etc. It's like celebrities.
Yeah.
You'll have the editors, you'll have the influencers, etc. But the buyers and all of that now happens later on behind closed doors. So one-on-one appointments. It's no longer that, let's say, a financial thing. It's more or less purely marketing.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I was thinking about is, how people can, like, for example, I look at like Japanese like street culture and like how they, like the way they dress.
Yes.
And I'm like, I would dream to be able to like dress like that because it's just so cool. But this is what I would say to myself, and what I think a lot of people would say as well. Oh, you can't pull it off. So that term, pull it off, is that a legit thing, or is it just like my perception, or like people's perception of things, like, oh, he couldn't pull it off, she couldn't pull that off, I can't pull that off?
I think it's just your own perception.
It's just your own?
Your own.
Okay.
It's purely your own perception of yourself.
Okay.
So if no one is going to say, if you're able to pull it off and wear it, people will think, oh, he pulled it off.
Okay, so you're the one who decides if you can pull it off or not.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. But I think there's something that also, do you think that holds people back from like really like experimenting a lot more and like trying, new looks and new things?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah?
Definitely. And let's not forget, there are certain, so it really also depends on the personality of the person. Okay. So in a way, when we're designing, even as designers, the clothing shouldn't be wearing you should be wearing it.
So what does that mean?
Okay. So at the end of the day, the clothing is just that, is there to make you in the most kind of beautiful form, or send out an image or anything of that sort. But at the end of the day, you're in power. So it's you wearing the clothing.
Okay.
And it shouldn't be like the clothing wearing you, in a sense that it shouldn't be overpowering you as a person.
I see. Okay. So it should like kind of match my personality and if anything emphasize my personality and who I am.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you. Okay, that makes a lot of sense now, because I've heard that people say that all the time, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. I'm wearing the same thing. And you said that, so your inspiration was, let me just make sure I get it right. So a fusion of cultures between European, American, and Arab, right?
Correct.
So in fashion, do you think it's really the beauty of it is the meshing of different kind of cultures, or is this something just personal to you?
I think it's not important in fashion. I think it's something in the fabric of society. So, for example, walking down the street in Dubai, you find people wearing traditional wear, the Arab traditional wear.
Yep.
And then you and I today are wearing our colonizers' clothing, so it's Western clothing.
That's true.
Okay.
True.
So this is the idea of mine. You're either wearing something very traditional, which probably hasn't been reinvented since for a few hundred years.
Yeah.
Or we're wearing what the West or our previous colonizers or whatever you want to call it, is clothing.
Okay.
So when I came in, I'm like, no, I want to be able to wear something. Oh, there we go. Something that is a mesh between both, because I am wearing my colonizer's clothing, but I want to Arabize it in a way, because this is who I am.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's kind of the whole, and why I say like European clean, because like I went to an Italian school, like there's no way that everything has to happen on a pattern, on a paper. Everything had to like
So
be measured.
yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, let's throw fabric and like, no, that's not how Italians were. Like it had to be like the tutor would or the teacher would walk around with like a ruler measuring every single thing when we were creating, and it was just like as hectic as possible. So that's why like I say that with European clean cuts, because that was how it was.
That's how it was. And what other cultures or what other like fashion things or cultures do you like that maybe in the future you'd like to incorporate into your clothing as well? Is there one that you like you've had in mind but like you're just trying to figure out how to bring it in?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah. I think you know me, and we've known each other for a long while. I am obsessed with travel.
Yeah.
I tend, as when I get the opportunity, I love traveling and really getting to meet people of different cultures. But yet again, I always kind of look at it, and maybe that could hinder me, or it could be my source of power.
Sure.
Is that I, as an Arab, well, modern Arab, let's put it that way, as an Arab, that with that blend, how do I translate it to myself? So even if I'm inspired by a Japanese culture, but how do I view it as an Arab, and how do I want to consume it?
Yeah. How do you want to portray that thing that you like?
Exactly.
Okay, I got you. No, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing I was thinking about, so if you go like Japan, you go Paris, you go Italy, whatever. Everywhere in the world has like, that's how they dress there. You know, that's the fashion there. So I was thinking, I'm like, does Dubai have one? Do you know what I mean? Like, does Dubai have like a fashion like staple, a culture? Do you understand what I mean? Like, oh, that's the Dubai look. But I don't think so. I don't know. What do you think? You know, I think you'd be better at judging.
I don't think there's a Dubai look. I think there is a personality that you kind of people have in Dubai, which tends to be more of kind of people tend to dress up more here and more designer brands, etc.
True.
The amount of brands that you wear on a single day in Dubai will make you a target in Europe if you were walking down the street, right?
Yeah. True.
Like you can't pull that off. Like so that is it. Like
Yeah.
or it will make you a target in anywhere else in the Arab world. But
True.
like so it's interesting how to see it. Like you can actually tell like, oh yeah, this is such a Dubai thing, because like the comfort of us kind of wearing stuff and being over the top and etc. I think that's a very Dubai thing.
Yeah, I think I would.
It's always over the top.
Yeah, it would be. No, I think I would agree. I wanted to come back to so when you were first starting out, because I know, and like you correctly said, like to start a fashion brand and to start all that, it's like it's very difficult, and it takes like, and it requires a significant investment too. So like when you were starting out at the beginning, what was like the vision you had? Like what did you want to do, and what are some of the challenges you were facing like right when you started out? Because I'm sure you've learned a lot in the last few years.
Okay. Interesting. So I think let's rewind a bit, and
Okay.
I'll tell you like an important kind of aspect of it.
Sure.
So I always wanted to start my own thing ever since I was really young.
Okay.
Like that's something I knew deep down.
Yeah.
So actually, upon graduating, I just started my own
Straight away.
straight away. I had certain experiences interning here and there with other people, but it was more of like a business internship. Sorry.
Yeah.
So the mistakes that you make, and I wanted to actually speaking with my parents, I sat them down and I was just like, I'm gonna do this and we're gonna do this, and they're like, why now? Go like, I don't know, find a job and then figure it out and then see if you want to do it like work for someone.
Sure.
And I actually told them, I'm actually young, dumb, and like stupid that I'm able to dream. If I do grow older, I'll have like consequences or I'll start thinking of why I shouldn't be doing this. Because you'll be stable, you'll be etc. So it's just like, oh, I shouldn't be taking the risk. Khalas, I'm comfortable. So I actually wanted to capitalize on kind of
The opportunity, that chance in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. I knew like you're young, you're dumb, and you're stupid, and you're willing to take risks. Like, take it.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe if as a now almost turning a 29-year-old or 29, almost turning 30. If you told me today go launch your own thing, I'd be like, nah. A few years back, that I would have like, yeah.
And when when you were starting out, was it just yourself, or did you immediately start hiring people, and like how did you kind of get yourself like up and running?
So, well, it was just registering the company and doing all that. Of course, it was just on my own, and then we hired a tailor. That was our first hire. That managed to not show up to work anymore after a month before the first fashion show.
Oh, that's a great time to not show
up. They went on vacation and never came back.
Okay.
And then that was kind of a month before my first fashion show. So see, sometimes I really appreciated that I had that stitching techniques done. So I sat behind the sewing machine, finished things up. I also had a friend who already had her studio set up, and I went rushing to her, and I'm like, hey, please. So she was able to help as well. So with her team and me finishing up some of the work at home, we were able to showcase for the first time.
For the first time.
Yeah.
Well, and did you feel that was like, in the past, looking back over the last few years, was that the turning point? Like that first show? Or do you feel like the turning point came a little bit later?
The turning point of what? Like
from get you like that really took you from like just, someone unknown to someone like, oh, now everyone knows.
No. That took years and years of self-reflection, self-sabotage, the whole mental ups and downs of it to kind of realize that you're like, oh, okay, I'm able to do this. No, it took years. It wasn't that. That wasn't the turning point.
That wasn't the turning point.
No.
But it still must have been amazing that first show to be like, wow, I did all this.
Yes, but I think it comes with a lot of like, to be honest, a lot of maybe baggage or Arab thought of like, yalla, what's next? Like, you can't enjoy this. Like, what is the second thing? You need to capitalize on this and get going. You can't be there and enjoy the moment.
Yeah, that's true. No, I can relate to that for sure. Everyone's always looking at like, oh, I have this goal. You like get close to it, and then someone once told me on the podcast, like, once you get to your goal, you're already looking at the next one. So like you never really enjoy like what you actually like achieve in the end. So that's true. And what do you think about the fashion industry here? Because from what I remember when my ex was trying to start out a business, she found it like very difficult. It was like quite saturated. So is the same thing now, or like how do you kind of stand out in a market like this that's so international as well? Like,
okay, so I think it's so young. Like there isn't the infrastructure, to be honest, is still being built. Like it isn't present.
Okay,
it isn't.
You don't think so? Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Everything. Like compared to cities abroad, the infrastructure is still being built for the fashion industry. There is a lot of regional talent, but at the end of the day, it's really nurturing it. Because I feel like, again, we'll go back to it, people still, to a certain extent, don't believe that's a real job or that's a real career.
Yeah, for sure.
So... so people kind of either funding or anything of that sort is limited because really do you want to bet? Because in the fashion industry, you're betting onto kind of someone's brain or someone's head.
That's true. Yeah.
It's not something on paper.
Yeah. It's intangible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where the numbers can help you after a few years to prove that, my sales are, etc.
Yes.
But then again, you're changing your products every 6 months. So traditionally, let's put it that way, if not less.
Yeah.
So imagine like, okay, so this is how I kind of, because relate it to people.
Sure.
If you sell this bottle of water 100 years down the line, you're still selling this bottle of water. Your product hasn't changed.
Okay.
You might change the packaging a little bit, but the essence of it is
It's
this
a
bottle of water.
Yeah.
We're changing the contents of this or whatever this product is every 6 months.
Yeah.
So walk into a store every 3 months, your whole product range has changed.
That's true.
It's not continuous. It's not, yes, a t-shirt and pants, but that color might work, that color might not work. Like, you're changing everything about it.
Yeah.
So it's not a constant product. That's why you're betting everything, all your manpower, your cash, etc., on a brand new product.
Yeah.
That's forever changing.
Yeah.
And I think people don't realize that. People see it as a risky venture.
Yeah.
But I don't, because for me, it's like you're betting onto someone's creativity and mind and all of that. So if they are able to retail or sell product A, then they're able to really play around and sell everything.
Yeah, but you need. It sounds like you need like one at least proof of concept or proof of success that makes you feel comfortable to continue down, that path.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's actually a very good point that you said. The water bottle example is great. That you are changing so much every few months, and it's almost like you're starting a new business every 3 months because it's an investment, and they're like, oh, will this take off? But the time frames are really short. It's not like I'll wait 2-3 years to see if this worked out. No, I'll know in a couple months if this worked out or not. So that's really true. And I was thinking, because coming on to this, the point you just mentioned, I'm like, I'm pretty sure you would say this, but does fashion need to constantly evolve? This is what I mean. Like, your brand, for example, like you said, every couple months there's with the ready-to-wear side, probably new collection, new things, whatever. But like, there's an essence of like a brand or like a fashion brand that you could, like, I could look at your clothes and be like, oh, it looks different, but I know that's Zaid. Do you understand what I mean? So does it have to continuously evolve, and how do you keep, I guess, that essence? How does that come?
I think that essence comes naturally.
Okay.
Because it's how I consume what I see.
Yeah.
And then how I put it out to the world. Okay. So I imagine myself as a filter.
Okay.
So I go around looking for inspiration, or I see something and I filter it in.
Yeah.
It goes through my brain and gets jumbled around, and then I produce something. So the essence is the same thing. It's my visuals, it's my process, it's my way of thinking. So that's how you see consistency in a way.
Okay.
And to kind of and does fashion have to evolve? Of course. We don't wear the same things that our grandparents wore. I think
that's true.
Politics, on the underground scene, social issues, everything of that sort changes our fashion sense day to day.
Yeah, that's actually. I think that's a good point. I guess I never considered how much, like, all these factors that you wouldn't think have anything to do with fashion still affect fashion at the end of the day, because they're affecting culture, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And if not, we're the kind of number one thing for culture, because you're your own billboard in a way. So you're representing your culture or who you are as an individual.
Yeah, I love that saying. That's awesome. I'm gonna steal that, guys. Just a heads up. You're your own billboard. That's beautiful. One thing I was thinking about is, I get with like your the ready to wear side, how you could price that, because I think of it like a normal business. I buy X, there's a multiplier on it, blah blah blah. But the challenge I don't understand is when it comes to the one-off pieces, because how do you price something like that? I'm just curious. In your idea, is it because there's hours that I spent on it? It's so detailed. There's probably special types of fabrics. So there's so many different elements, including your time and like the creativity to make something like that you would price into what you would sell something like that for. So how do people think about that, or is it just completely subjective?
No, it's the same way.
Oh, it is the same.
Yeah,
oh,
it's
really?
the same way. But like, for example, instead of like a t-shirt taking an hour, this takes a month.
Yeah.
So or like the stitching takes a month instead of an hour. So let's put it that way. It's multiplied by a larger, kind of by a larger amount. That's why it's more expensive, but it's almost the same way.
So the same kind of like setup and stuff. It's just
Yeah.
I guess you factor in the man hours that
Oh, yeah.
that go into putting something like that.
Yeah, because with these one of a kind pieces, the materials tend to be more expensive, but the bulk of the cost is not the materials, it's the man hours. So if you're embroidering, let's say, a dress, it can be made out of the pure silk and the silk materials, crystals, etc. But if it's taking an embroiderer 4 months to create it, that is more expensive
than what the actual like what you're using is.
Yeah.
The time investment in it. And that's actually a good point. So when it comes to like fabric, because like for example, when I go get a suit, the price is typically the higher the higher the fabric, the higher the price of the suit standard. So, but I think with other maybe more like your everyday, for example, the more casual stuff, is it really important? Do you always want to have like that best fabric, or can you sometimes do a lot with good technique with a fabric that might be cheaper?
Okay. That is a good question. You're able to do that.
You can do that with.
But yeah, but like you can't lie to your consumers.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. Yeah.
But yeah, you're able to really play around with, if you're using the right materials and you have the right eye for materials, you're able to use anything. That's why some people can create pieces out of recycled material, plastics, or anything of that sort.
Yeah.
Everything can be made out of fashion if possible. Yeah.
So, and you said something interesting now, having an eye for the fabric. So this is what I was thinking. So there's a fashion designer, because fashion designing, it's a skill, but there's also, as people say, you have to have an eye for it. So is there like let's say you and another person, you train same amount of time, but there's that innate talent, that eye for fashion. So is there like, can that be developed over time, or is that something that you just have?
No, you learn it. So you really learn how each fabric is weaved, what each fabric is used for, certain cultures, how they've historically used this fabric. Because at the end of the day, not every fabric, like it's not every manufacturer in the world can produce all the fabrics.
Yeah.
So historically, like the silk route, and because the silk was produced in China, and then eventually because they've used it first, how they've manipulated it. Cotton is like one of the best cotton manufacturers previously, and the best quality is Egyptian cotton. So you really touch into that, and you look at how they've used it. People have used it for centuries. So
yeah,
and you take it from there.
And I've noticed today in a lot of the points that you talked about, you've really talked about the history behind all this. It sounds like that's such an important part to like that comes into like fashion, knowing the history, but not just focusing like what is going on today, but like bringing or understanding why it was that way in the past and how it affects now.
I think it's just I'm a history nerd in general.
Okay.
So my focus has, ever since I've been a child, I love history. I consume history books, and like I love that. It's kind of being like a painter. You need to know your art history. You need to know why at this moment this painting was so important. Yes, you really need to, it's the same thing with fashion. That person deconstructed this, that person used that. You really need to understand that, because like in every single field, let's say maybe let's relate it back to architecture or engineering. Maybe someone built a house in a creative way that you don't need to use any foundations or anything of that sort. That's part of the history of architecture or engineering.
Yeah,
or
true.
Use the foundations in a certain manner. So yeah, you can't forget it or disregard it. It's part of it. It's
still relevant now.
Yeah.
And one thing I was thinking about is, how I hear people talking like girls sometimes saying, oh, this is like not in season anymore, or that. And I'm like, all these big brands, they like, for some, as time goes on, like let's say for the fall season, this is the new thing that's like exciting. This new thing. But in my head, I'm like, why do you decide that? What if I wanted to wear something like that, but the outside perception, everyone's gonna look at me like, oh, that's old stuff.
Okay, so I generally, I, I don't want to say I agree with that or disagree,
Okay.
and I will relate it back to depends on how you pull it.
Okay.
If you pull it off, um, there's a certain style, let's say, that's adopted with the general public.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we, again, as I mentioned, we're a seasonless brand, etc. Um, like, I think we also, as a society, are moving towards a certain dimension that are very individualistic in a way that we want to kind of wear what represents us as individuals. We want to showcase. We want to make a point, or we love who we are, and we just want to show the world. So I think we've come to an era where it really depends on personal style and what you want to do with it. So there isn't something to me that's, yeah, maybe certain details, elements. Sometimes you're like, oh, that's such a nice piece from a vintage piece or something of that sort. But then let's not forget, like, vintage has become in style as well. So I feel like that's completely irrelevant to us. Maybe in the early 2000s, I would have agreed with it more, but I don't agree with it that much right now.
Okay. Interesting. So times have changed, basically.
Big time.
Big time. Yeah. Everyone, like you said, it's about, this is how, I don't care what the style is, what's going on. This is how I want to wear. This is how I want to represent myself.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you think now? Let's say, okay, you said that was interesting. So you said in the 2000s, early 2000s till now, you could have, like, the style probably played a bigger factor in, like, how you dressed. But now that things are changing, what do you think, like, moving forward now, let's say for the next, like, 10 years, what do you think is going to be the new thing? Is it just going to be, like, heightened, that individualism, or do you think there's more things to come?
I think definitely heightened individualism,
Yeah.
because right now we are living in a pandemic world as well.
Sure.
I think if you're showcasing, or you're somehow now getting dressed for yourself, not for anyone else. Like, imagine how many outings you've reduced in this year or anything of that sort. So every morning you're like, maybe I'll see someone if you're going out. It depends on which country you're in.
Sure.
But most countries, you're currently under lockdown. So it's like, oh, I'm not seeing anyone, so I'm getting dressed for me.
Yeah.
So that it will heighten that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe certain elements. So for example, work clothing. A lot of people, and we're forecasting or are forecasting that work outfits or work clothing is not going to be back or sellable until 2022 maybe.
That's true. Yeah, actually, you hear, like, a lot of people be like, I haven't worn a suit or, like, a shirt in, like, 8-9 months now because I've just been at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now, yes, the trends do change. So we have to follow trends in a way that we have to provide products that are more comfortable. For example, right now, as we're producing and designing, so we're thinking more comfortable pieces that you can throw into a washing machine, no problem, because now everyone, as soon as they come back home, they just throw their pieces. So things like that. So it's just certain elements. It's how culture affects it. Again, it's not. It's external factors that you have to adapt to.
That's true. So, on the concept of trends, who decides who sets the trend? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's the people.
It's the people, you think? Whatever everyone starts to, like, move towards, that is now the new trend.
I think it's the people with an element of creatives. So the creatives in general, because how do creatives get inspired? It's from their surrounding.
Yeah.
So it's the creatives presenting something that people feed into it.
Yeah.
And then they set the tone for the rest of the world to follow.
Sure.
So it's somehow the people feeding inspiration to creatives.
That's kind of where, So that's actually interesting that I've never looked at it in that way, because I thought it's just, I guess the big boys, the big fashion brands in the world, they're the ones who set the new trends, and now everyone else kind of follows. But it's almost the other way around. They're seeing this is where everyone's going, so let's start making it like that, so everyone continues to go that way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I never thought of that. Looking back over the last few years, Zaid, what do you think? What advice would you have to, let's say, there's a young person now who wants to get into the fashion industry, given everything you've been through over the last couple of years? What advice would you have to them?
A very interesting question that it's definitely hard to answer. I think as creatives, I think the biggest advice is that we create because we're more in touch with the world or who we are as individuals. And I think we tend to get lost in a way, especially when you add the pressure of, at the end of the day, you're a business. You need to make money to keep the lights on. Especially if you're lucky enough to have someone to run the business while you create, that you're in a very lucky position.
Sure. Yeah.
But if there isn't and you're running the business and you're creating, I think it's really kind of enjoying the moment for what it is. And I think it's oversaid. But yet again, because the day you lose yourself, you're going to lose your creativity.
That's great advice.
Really kind of put your mindset, do what makes you happy in a way. I know the world will factor in, will push you down, everything of that sort, but always be ready for it mentally. Be in a good place.
Be in a good place.
Always thrive to be in a good place. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And like you said, if you lose yourself, you lose your creativity. I think a lot of the creatives in the world could probably relate to that a lot. Because I'm sure at points everyone in that world has felt that at some point.
Especially this year.
And because I had someone on the podcast who is a music producer, and I asked him, and I think it's similar with fashion. I asked him, you could look back at how do you know when a piece is done? Because I bet you look back at some pieces you made and you can be like, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that, I could have done that. And he told me it was just a feeling, like an intuition. He's like, now it feels complete. Is it the same with fashion for you? Like when you make a piece, you're like, now it's done.
Okay, so I make a piece, now I say now it's done. Yes, it's an intuition.
Yeah.
But then again, maybe 2 months later when I see other things and I kind of go through certain experiences or anything of that sort, I can say, looking back at that piece, that wasn't done, so I need to kind of push it further.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess you could constantly do that.
Yeah,
right?
You have to. If you're not moving forward and you're not seeing your mistakes or what you've done in previous pieces, there might be perfection in that moment, but then...
yeah. As you get better, you'll be like, oh, it's not perfect anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're not moving forward and you're actually seeing what you're producing is perfect all around, then there is a question mark.
There's something going on. Okay, that's very true. What would you say is the biggest thing you learned when you from launching the business to now? Or what was the biggest mistake that you made in the early days?
Early days, losing myself.
Losing yourself. Getting too, is it? And and when you say that, does that mean you became too focused on making this a business and not that?
No. I think it was just pressure, pressure that I've placed onto myself.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. You want to be successful, of course.
You want to be successful, and you kind of want this to happen overnight, which is not realistic whatsoever. And you start realizing that, I want it to be there. And it's goals that you've set up for yourself that are completely unachievable, unrealistic. You start going down that, and it's the problem is that when you go down that spiral, you just go deeper and deeper and deeper into it.
That's true.
It's just nature. It's not something that you can handle. And I think it's at that moment realizing that what I have is good.
Yeah.
And I think it comes from a point of, yes, I'm privileged enough to have it, then I should appreciate it for how it is. I see the constant growth. I see the me evolving as a person. And then at that point for me,
Sure.
I start realizing I'm like, yes, no, I need to kind of pick myself up and give myself more credit for what I'm able to do, and then push forward. I think that is the most important thing. I think I don't want to say losing myself. I think it's just losing yourself with your own kind of vision of yourself.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. And switching, like you said, switching your mindset to one more of gratitude for like the growth and the journey you're on, and being appreciative of the work you've put out so far, and like this piece or whatever it might be.
Correct.
And for my last few questions, Zaid, and thank you about this has been a fantastic conversation. I knew zero about the fashion industry, and now at least I know something. First of all, I was thinking, I'm like, what in your opinion, what's the criteria that makes a good fashion designer? Like, why do you look at that guy or like that girl and be like, oh, she's good? Because they can all have, the talent of like the stitching and all that, but what is the thing that kind of makes them be seen that way?
A fashion designer?
Yeah.
I think relevance.
And what does that mean?
The ability to capture that emotion, if I may say.
Okay.
So it's the same way that you're looking at an art piece.
Okay.
A lot of, especially with fashion designers and creatives, you are not relevant until later on in your life.
That seems to be the case.
Yeah, I think it's just the creative's curse. A lot of artists do not sell pieces until they die.
Yeah.
So it's more or less that. It's just, it's how relevant you are to the viewer. And you might not be relevant at that moment of time. You might be ahead of your time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not something to kind of... It's the whole point of it is just creating.
Yeah.
Create.
Yeah.
You'll find an audience, whether you find an audience in this lifetime or
after.
you might leave a full-on collection for generations to come. Just create. You have a voice. And use that. You have a voice and you have a talent that you should capitalize on.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it sounds like it's almost timeless because you don't know when it's going to be relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. I've never thought of it that way before. And another question I have is, when you look back over the last few years, I think I have an idea of what would be, but I'm curious to see what you'd say. What are you most proud of?
Oh. What am I most proud of? I think... What do you think it is?
Me personally, I think it's I think probably your growth as both a person and as a creative. I think that because I think it both play into the work you've done and the work you've put out. That would be, based on our conversation, that would be what I say.
It's true. Personal growth.
Personal growth.
Personal growth, 100%. And don't forget, it came in at a very critical age. So whoever, over the past few years, whoever I was I was pretty young. So when it's a time where you're growing your personality and getting to know yourself even more.
For sure.
And adding your work on top of it. Yeah, it's definitely... So it's surprising that the opportunities that I sometimes would say no to right now, I would have died for.
But back in the day.
Back in the day.
For sure.
Yeah.
100%.
Like some things fall into my lap. I'm like, no, that's not us.
Yeah,
I'm not doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I would have been like, you're such an idiot. Like my younger version would be kind of disappointed.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's just like, you're like, I know who I am. I know what we're able to create.
Yeah.
I know the team around me. And yeah, that's...
And would you say that your work and your creativity is... I think what's cool about what you do is your work is kind of a reflection of how far you've come. You know what I mean? I know I grew as a person and I probably got better as a creative, but when I look at this piece that I made, let's say this year, for example, and I look at the first piece I ever made, it's like a visual validation of, no, you've improved, you've come this far. Would you agree?
I agree. But when you're producing, so this is kind of something that I always look at. When I'm producing a piece, it's or I imagine one and I create it. Yeah. It's like a snapshot of your personality and who you were and your experiences at that moment.
Nice. Yeah.
So sometimes you are happier as an individual, or like you're going through certain stuff. So that snapshot is way better than what you're creating right now sometimes,
Yeah, yeah.
because you're in the ditches. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
so sometimes, yes, like maybe let's say put it that way. Um, your techniques, your creativity, a lot of things start coming to you way easier just because of like experiences that you've
Of course,
gained.
yeah.
Um, but then again, to kind of take that dreamy aspect, you really sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I was like there. This is like my happy moment. That's why this was produced.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, when you're in the ditches, it's hard to probably look at it. So looking at it as a snapshot is a lot more enjoyable, I guess,
Yeah.
and more relevant. Something you're gonna remember, like, oh, that moment, that piece. That's how I felt.
Oh, definitely.
And for my last question, Zaid, this is a question I ask all my guests: is what is the message you'd like people to take home with them today?
Ah, interesting. I think it's we are all kind of capable of an output, um, and we are representatives of kind of our previous generations, who we are. We're very individualistic. We are the outcome of all of the world, of what's happening culturally, what's happening socially, especially even our grandparents or our parents. We are the outcome of all of that, and your voice should be heard, whether it's a creative manner or whatever you're doing. So don't get discouraged by anything, and I think just put it out there in the world, and eventually you'll find someone, or you'll find your own tribe in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, like never kind of give up, because whatever you think of, or the way you think and the way you create, for especially for creatives, it takes a time. It takes a lot of time, and you are the outcome of all your experiences, your parents, your grandparents, previous generations, and just put it out there. There's someone there that will appreciate it, or you might be a beacon of hope for someone.
True. That's very true. So, like you said, put your voice out there, because you'll probably eventually find someone that's going to listen, or a lot of people that might listen. Your audience, your tribe.
Yeah, and just acknowledge. Luckily, acknowledge kind of your privilege in this world, and you might have opportunities that are more than other people's would have, or more than other people would have in a lifetime. So
Yeah.
capitalize on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Look at your privilege more than kind of the negative side. I think we had a lot of self-reflection
This year.
this year.
For sure.
And so, yeah, that's kind of the simpler way to say it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's really, really, really great advice, man. And I think anyone could relate to that, and especially for people in the creative field, to remember that you do have a voice, and that you should just keep creating, and eventually you put it out there, you'll get what you want back, and then hopefully if you can continue doing what you're doing. I think a lot of people can relate to that, and if anyone's looking to guys to get into fashion or whatever, this is the guy you need to talk to. And I learned so much from our conversation today. I want to say thank you so much, Zaid. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for having me again.
It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure, man. Guys, to everyone, thank you so much for listening, and as always, hope it helps. Peace.